Welcome back. It is a brand new episode of Two Please. I'm your Sabin.
And I'm your co-host Rohit.
Hey, we have a guest today, dude. I'm very glad to introduce to our lovely community the indomitable Falah Faisal. For those of you who don't know, Falah is the author of the nation's most controversial comic, Musalman. Falah, for the entirety of his life, has been a very controversial figure. There was a point in his life where he was like, dude, I want to see just how much I can push the envelope. As a matter of fact, a lot of his videos are now being repurposed on WhatsApp groups to be, as part of like political propaganda. He is a journalist, he's a stand up comic. He's also my late night movie companion buddy. Whenever there's a movie to watch, and if there's a movie that's completely gone under my radar, Falah's like, bro, will you come? Let's go. But yes, Falah, welcome to the show. I apologize for the random, incoherent introduction, but thank you for coming
on. I hope you edit this better, maybe. I don't know.
Nice
to be here. I don't usually do podcasts, but because I don't watch podcasts in general, I just find it as I don't know. Some of these podcasts never appeal to me as a medium, but I'm like, okay, let's do one and see how it's like.
But okay, what are we talking about today, my friend? I mean, today's topic came from Falah, but I'll let Rohit introduce it because I've been talking for too long.
Cool. I was like, why are you asking me? Makes sense. No, so what we're essentially talking about today is movies that are based on graphic novels but are not about superheroes. I mean, I'm sure there's a shorter, more succinct way of putting that, but essentially that's what we're talking about. And I think the idea behind it was to challenge ourselves to move beyond the whole trope or the convention of comics just being around superheroes, right? There's more to comics beyond just paranormal or superpowered individuals. So, and there are a lot of interesting stories out there, some of which have been adapted to film. We're going to try and discuss some of them. Not all of, at least one of my selections is definitely not a good movie in my opinion. It's an interesting watch, right? So hopefully you guys get a mixed bag, some nice critically acclaimed ones, some fun watches, and the idea is to sort of get people to think about graphic novels beyond the superhero. I think that's what we're hoping to do today. But yeah, with that, let's start the show.
Okay, so before we begin, are there any honorable mentions that you want to do?
I think 300 should be an honorable mention. I think when it comes to adaptations, I think Zack Snyder, Watchmen, and even though Watchmen is still about superheroes, with 300, it's attention to detail, it's translation from comic to film. I think Zack Snyder actually, we have the DCEU because of that movie, I guess.
And a case can be made up that those Spartans were more or less superheroes as portrayed in the movie. Nothing seemed to stop them. Almost crazy, right? An honorable mention I have, again, this is kind of skirting the rules a little because the source material is not exactly a manga, more a Japanese light novel, but I want to talk about Edge of Tomorrow for a quick minute. We have spoken about the movie in the Rewatchables episode, but All You Need Is Kill, which is the Japanese light novel from which the movie is adapted. Again, I haven't read the source material, but Abhin and I have waxed eloquent about our love for the movie. It kicks ass. The movie kicks ass.
And I love Edge of Tomorrow. It has, as Rohit mentioned, we've spoken about it in explicit detail on previous episodes. My honorable mention is a movie I would have liked to have included on this pod. It is from a manga. I have not read this particular story in the manga, but this is a movie that came out last year, and it's called The First Slam Dunk. And it is directed by the author Takahiro Inoue. So Inoue is responsible for two manga series, like two of the most legendary manga series coming out of Japan. The first being Slam Dunk, which was a huge cultural movement in the 90s. And the second being Vagabond, which is about this lone samurai, which is considered one of the best stories to ever come out of serialized stories to come out of Japan. And Inoue went and directed the first Slam Dunk as well, which is a phenomenal movie. It's anime. It's an anime movie. It's on Netflix everywhere but here for some reason. And it has probably some of the best depictions of basketball, of a basketball game. It's set in a high school. It's like a high school basketball game, which is then with the narrative weaving in and out of the game for each particular player. As a matter of fact, the main protagonist of the anime is not the hero of this story. It's somebody else altogether. And it's so well done and it's so tastefully done. I would have loved to have included it, but I don't think any of us in the panel have watched it as opposed to the other films on this list. So I highly recommend that you go check it out. It is so bloody good. And hopefully it pops up on next Netflix here in some time. But there are other places for you guys to go check it out if you can. The first Slam Dunk is my mention. But anyway, with that aside, let's quickly jump into everyone's twos. We have now shortened the threes to a list of twos in order to like maximize on time. The last time we did this with Ravi, the previous guest, we were here for 2 hours. So we don't want to do that again. So let's quickly like Falak, because you being the guest, please get us started.
Okay, I think the first film on my picks is Sin City. Sin City is a film directed by Robert Rodriguez based on a graphic novel by Frank Miller. And I think Frank Miller also co-directed the film, and Quentin Tarantino also like had a scene that featured in it. This is a film that came out in 2005, and I think was a landmark film when it comes to comic book adaptation because its use of green screen and digital filmmaking. So I think that would be my first pick.
I love Sin City. At least the first one, A Dame to Kill For, I couldn't be bothered, but which is the sequel. But the first one with just generally the cast that they pulled together and the Mickey Rourke story. The Mickey Rourke story tied in with the Bruce Willis story is up there. What's the guy called? Yellow Bastard, is he not? The Nick.
The Yellow Bastard or something.
Ugly Yellow Bastard, something. Yeah, but I remember watching it for the first time in 2005 and being completely blown away by it because I'd never seen anything like it. And I, at this point, got really enthused with Frank Miller's body of work because somebody mentioned to me, he has like, oh, this is just like the tip of the iceberg. This man has done a Batman graphic novel called The Dark Knight Returns, which could have been another adaptation shout, for all we know. But
it's superhero, bro. It's Batman is in the name.
Yeah, correct. Right. Of course. Never mind. Guys, it's been a long day. I'm sorry. It's been a while. Yeah, anyway, my bad. Anyway,
who do you think is the Dark Knight?
The Bruce Wayne story. Okay. So anyway, but yeah, this was like my introduction to the world of Frank Miller because soon after this 300 followed, we just mentioned it on the pod. And I think there was a movie called The Spirit, which he directed in 2008, which I also watched and was complete ass.
That was after Sin City.
Yes.
It was the cash grab after Sin City that didn't go very well.
Yeah,
exactly. And but Sin City, so much of it, man, is so beautifully stylized. Elijah Wood as this weird cannibal guy with long claws was kind of creepy.
Yeah,
I mean, a fun watch. A little off the rails at points. The whole Clive Owen, Benicio del Toro. Oh, dude, all this is coming back to me. I haven't like watched that movie in about a good 15 years, but a lot of that imagery is slowly coming back.
Yeah, in fact, the Benicio del Toro scene in the car is actually directed by Tarantino. They were friends, and like Tarantino is a full pro film person. Like he doesn't like digital filmmaking, but when Rodriguez was doing this thing, they will let me come on board, direct a scene, and see what the shit's like. I think he directed the conversation between Clive Owen and Benicio del Toro in the car when he's the talking head.
I thought he'd done the sequence prior where Benicio del Toro becomes the talking head with that entire bloodbath sequence involving the prostitute gang. But okay, fair enough.
What a sentence to string together, bro. Did you just hear what he said?
It's the movie. It's the movie, guys. But what can I say?
No, fair enough. I remember being... I think the Elijah Wood character left the deepest impression on me because the last thing I'd seen him in was the LOTR trilogy, and I remember I was like, "Damn, Bilbo kept the ring." Looks like, sorry, Frodo kept the ring. It's turned him completely. Very, and now obviously Elijah Wood has made a career out of doing things that are very unexpected and out of turn for him. He's built this beautiful little niche for himself. But in hindsight now it seems obvious that he would take up roles like these. But I remember, and those round shades of his which were yellow I remember that image is so like seared into my mind. And like you were saying, Abhin, right? Flashes of the story are coming back to me, but I don't think this is the sort of movie where you were needed or expected to pay too much attention to the story. It was very stylized visual showcase, right? And I think just similar to the movie we were discussing last week, Tumbad, it's got a very distinctive color palette. And like we were discussing over the week, I mean, sort of a Tarantino, Rodriguez, these are people who bring, exactly what to expect stylistically from their films. And this is in that sense an the archetypical Rodriguez movie in many ways, right? It's that you just know that it's packed to the brim with that flair of his, and it feels like a graphic novel come to life, right? In that sense, it doesn't feel like a movie. It's got that aesthetic.
I think a lot of us also like. I think my first introduction to Robert Rodriguez was through Spy Kids growing up. I think Spy Kids 1 and 2
Yeah.
was how we were introduced to Rodriguez. So like, as from going from children's like movie to like Sin City was like a huge jump. I think I was like in that phase where I was discovering Tarantino just then. Yeah, I'd seen Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction around the same time. I'm like, wait, what's more by this guy? And I was like, hey, let me check out this film called Sin City. So I watched that and it was like one of those, it kind of like completely blew my mind when I saw it. I've gone through the process of reading the graphic novel multiple times. Yeah, I've read the whole Sin City from beginning to end, like at least 2, 3 times at least that I can remember, and
Hmm.
seen the movie. I think like even my first short film was like sort of a homage to Sin City, in my opinion. Like I looked at Sin City
Mm.
and hey, I was like, I want to do something exactly like this. So I picked a comic book, made it black and white, with those red highlights. So like my first short film, in fact, was like a complete imitation homage to Sin City. So it is one of those films that kind of like transformed me. Like it put me in the direction, ki, like, hey, I want to make movies. And I want to make movies like this. It was sort of like what Sin City was. Why Sin City is so important to me.
That's nice.
It also had, a side note, and I'm like, Farah just waxed eloquent about his, like how the movie how the graphic novels inspired him to be, to pursue the line of work that he's currently pursuing. And I am coming in to talk about how we were all just staring at Jessica Alba on a table, at the age of what, 13 to 14 years old, just being like, holy hell,
Only with your friend.
what is happening? But yeah, that was Sin City. Let's move on to number two. My number one, rather. And I think this was like, if you talk about non superhero graphic novel adaptations, this is probably on everybody's list. This is the Road to Perdition series, or the Road to Perdition movie that came out in 2003. Now there's a whole series of these books, right? There's Road to Perdition. I think there's Return to Perdition is the final one. There's a Road to Purgatory somewhere in the middle, and it follows the story of Michael Sullivan Senior's family, like going on from junior, so on and so forth. But I haven't read all of those. What I have done is I have watched the movie, and as far as adaptations go, holy shit, what
Yeah.
a beautiful film. And I remember this movie came out in 2003 2004, around that time.
Yeah.
Directed by Sam Mendes, starring Tom Hanks, Daniel Craig, motherfucking Paul Newman, I think in his last
His
ever
last
role.
movie role.
So, and it tells the story of this
I mean, last
of this kid.
on-screen role, because Cars exists, but fuck Cars. Right?
Yeah, it tells the story of a father trying to protect his son from the mob that he's a part of, and it's the journey of what they go through to get through it. And I remember watching it as a child and being very moved by it. And
So even Road to Perdition is not a film that you think of as a comic book film or a
not
graphic
at all.
novel
Yeah.
film. To be honest, like it's like one of those things you see it. It's a Tom Hanks movie. It's like a prestige project. Like you don't really associate it with like being an adaptation. You think of it as an original work. It's only like when you open up the Wikipedia page and you like look at, oh, it's adapted from so and so, that you will even know that it is a film that is adapted. Because it's like you can't really tell its comic book influence when you actually watch the film. I think, at least for the first time.
Yeah, no, I agree. In fact, again, this was around the time when I was getting into Paul Newman. For context, Paul Newman is my favorite, like male movie actor, and I was getting into Butch Cassidy. I think just about then watched The Sting, and then around that time I watched Road to Perdition. I was like, damn, this guy like was batting 100 right up to his final role, like just knocking it out of the park. Very impactful. His screen time isn't a lot, but his presence looms over the duration of the film, because he is the big boss or he's rather the reluctant baddie, right? He knows his son is in Daniel Craig is a bit of a loser, or a malignant character, but you have to perform these roles, that you have to protect your son, even though you know he's wrong, and he's very reluctant. He loves Michael, but he knows Michael has his own principles, and they're like, okay, we have to do this. So he brings that energy to screen really well. The one thing that's really stuck with me beyond just the movie is the score. I think Thomas Newman gave the
Yes.
score. There's a particular track called Rock Island 1931, which is that whole bagpipe, Irishy sounding music. It's very nice, very haunting. And I think that's one of the leitmotifs in the film. So music is something I listen. I think I listen to that Rock Island track at least once a week, once a month, even to this date. I mean, I watched the movie last, I think, 10, 15 years ago. But I think if I had to sum up that movie in one sentiment, it'll be melancholy, right? The
Wow.
whole movie is a bunch of characters acting reluctantly because they have some sort of code of honor to follow, and it's a very a tragedy playing out in slow motion. You're like, guys, if any of you just decided to do the logical thing instead of the honorable thing, this would get over very quickly. But no, everyone has to see their actions through, and you just feel sad at the end, right? Like none of this had to happen. But it's a lovely, lovely watch.
Yeah, I have nothing more to add. Great movie, guys. Go watch it. It's on Hotstar if you're watching it.
Oh no.
Oh, is it? Nice. I'll
Yeah, it's on
probably
Hotstar.
rewatch
So
it
yeah.
sometime.
So like, please go check it out. And if you need to know where it's playing on your local streaming service, you can check out Unogs or Just Watch and figure it out. But yeah, that was Road to Perdition. Rohit, we haven't got into yours yet. Let's do it.
I'm going to open a whole can of worms now. And,
Okay.
talk about the movie which probably came to everyone's mind first when thinking about graphic novel adaptations which aren't about superheroes, which is 2005 or 6 is V for Vendetta, directed by James McTeague. More importantly, based on Alan Moore's graphic novel of the same name. Again, I'm using based very loosely here. I'm sure Fala will have to say a lot more on that. But before I hand the mic over to him for his diatribe, just my two cents on the film. I think at the time when I watched it, and I think I watched around the time of release when I was 16, 17, very impressionable, loved the movie. I remember at the time,
2005.
it's a very, yeah, it's a very quotable film in its defense, right? When you don't think too deeply, it's got quips, right? Ideas are bulletproof and all. Like, oh, this sounds cool. So I remember I've rewatched the movie a fair bit, probably more than I care to admit today, right? So and it felt very deep at the time. Now I realize how naive I was and how naive the movie is, right? Because as and when you start to learn more about how things happen around the world, or they have happened around the world over the decades and centuries, you realize that evil is a lot less overt and a lot more surreptitious, right? uh, the evil in this movie, like fascism, that they've shown in the movie, yes, it is an allusion to what happened in Europe and stuff in the 30s and 40s, but I would say that's an outlier of evil being that naked, it being that overt and flashy about it, right? Most of the time, evil is a little under the surface. It's co-opting things. You don't even realize you're being screwed over, right? And these are things that these happen to us all the time. They're happening to us today. They will continue to happen. So in hindsight, I'm like, bro, the world is not this black and white. We're all navigating a sea of gray.
I think I debate that because I mean you know the country we live in right now and what we are going through currently. So I feel like it's not covert at all. And I feel like the movie V for Vendetta has an interesting point because when the whole the COVID outbreak happened, my first thought was V for Vendetta because that there's that whole Saint Mary's
The
virus
mask.
that goes out which kind of gives the right wing an excuse to intern people in camps and whatnot and like whatnot.
True, true,
So I
true.
think the parallel the movie holds to the present, like at least the last decade or so, is kind of strange because like the moment COVID happened, my first thought was, hey, this is what happens in V for Vendetta.
No, which is true. Like what's happening in our country today, maybe, and even what's happening in the US for the last 7, 8 years, probably are outliers to the larger trend. Right? But think of it over the last century, right? With the exception of these events and say the 30s and 40s in Europe, it's not like bad shit stopped, right? It just was a lot better at covering its tracks. I just feel uh, things that happen at a global scale, a lot of it is not immediately perceptible, right?
Hmm.
Unless you take the effort to educate yourself, you take the effort to read about what's happening and go one level deeper. I just feel the movie is a bit black and white. Now that I mean,
Hmm.
in hindsight, when I look back at it, it's a little too black and white. Things don't play out. The equivalent of
No,
that
but
would be if today in India or in the US there was this one figure who could come and change everything. Like, bro, that's not
yeah.
happening.
No, but that's also where I think the genre description kind of is weird, no? Because like I think V is also a superhero in certain sort of sense. He goes through a tragedy, is transformed, has superpowers in terms of how he fights and stuff. So I do think V still falls under a superhero category, in my opinion. And it's also black and white because it's hard to adapt like a 400-page graphic novel into like 1.5 hour film. Like the movie is
That's
like a
also
pop
true.
phenomenon. Like
Yeah.
I happen to own a signed copy of V for Vendetta. It was signed by Dave Gibbons, uh, and uh, like I'm one of those people who I think when I watched the movie first, I quite liked it. I think it is quite influential. But in the retro, once you read the graphic novel and you actually see the source material, the movie doesn't hold water after that because like there's
That's like
some key
Watchmen all over
principles.
again. Hmm.
Yeah, no, I
Hmm.
actually think Zack Snyder's Watchmen is better than the graphic novel. Whereas I
Oh,
feel like V for Vendetta, the
wow.
graphic novel is like, yeah, I think the ending is superior in Watchmen, like in my opinion. In
I
the
mean,
movie ending is an improvement on the graphic novel. I feel.
because
Whereas like
no
in V
giant
for
squid.
Vendetta, yeah, yeah, in the book it's Giant Squid, whereas here it's like Doctor
Hmm.
Manhattan's powers recreated, so it kind of I think ties
Hmm.
it better. But in V for
Hmm.
Vendetta, like I think the core of the book is trying to preach anarchy. It's trying to like say that okay, you don't need V, you can do it yourself, sort of a thing. That was, I think, the running theme of the graphic novel. And I think anarchy का mention भी नहीं होता है movie में. Like like people like it for different reasons. I think I had an ex who really liked the Stephen Fry's character in V for Vendetta
Hmm.
and how they have a collection of art, and that character is completely different in the graphic novel. Some people have varied opinions of how it's been adapted.
Also, I think a quick shout out needs to go to Hugo Weaving, who never really got to show
Mhm.
his face in the film, but manages to give a very good performance, right? Through
And he
sheer
wasn't the
voice
first
acting.
choice either. Like he wasn't the first choice. It was a recast that he got uh, into the role. I think
Oh,
somebody
okay.
else was playing the character first, and then they kind of had to step out. And Hugo Weaving was the second choice in the movie.
No, thank God for that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, this is it's produced by the Wachowskis, isn't it? It's not. It's directed by somebody else.
Yeah.
Produced and written by. Even the script is written or adaptation has been written by the Wachowskis.
Which brings me to the other rant I had going on is how the Wachowski steal from graphic novels without ever giving credit. So everybody
Uh,
like knows them for the Matrix, and the Matrix's core plot is actually like literally ripped off from Invisibles by Grant Morrison. If you've read the Invisibles or somebody's out there, read the Invisibles, and the whole plot of there is a small group of people. They find a chosen one. There's a Morpheus like bald guy who dresses in leather and wears cool shades. They find the chosen one. The chosen one is the person who helps them break down the bad guys who are like an big evil kind of who have a lot of machines and whatnot. Like they pretty much ripped off the whole of the Matrix ka main plot, at least the first film, from the Invisibles. If you read the Invisibles, it's like ditto. And maybe like the Matrix 2 and 3 are bad because I think they stopped copying the Invisibles because
I was just I was
it kind
just
of
about
goes
to bring
off
it up.
yeah, like had they stuck to the Invisible stealing, then it might have gone well for the trilogy. But because they stopped stealing from the Invisibles, is why the series goes off the rocker. I think.
Uh, let's stay in the same vein of like since we're discussing politics and anarchy. It's only right we discuss some communism as well. And I did not till this morning I did not know that our next movie was a graphic novel, and it is one of my favorite films of all time. Right, I fucking love this movie.
Yeah.
This is The Death of Stalin by Armando Iannucci. The plot revolves around the fact that Stalin dies from a stroke that he gets after reading a note from this rogue pianist, I think. And what follows is a series of comedic events and a lot of backstabbing, which for me, I watched this movie on a flight somewhere. I was coming back from Pune or something, and I just had it on my laptop. And I spent the entire flight just stupidly laughing at my screen. It is an
So,
absolutely phenomenal watch if you haven't seen it. I've anything Armando Iannucci does, I think his series Veep is
Yeah.
something I need to get into. It's one of Rohit's
Dude,
favorites, I know.
Veep's insults are top tier.
I think what
that's because
Iannucci cut his.
you guys are into like later Inuchi. Like if you actually look at Inuchi's earlier work, stuff like In the Loop and like his work with Alan Partridge and stuff. For me,
I was
like
about to bring it up. Yes.
his later stuff is far like lesser. I like because Death of Stalin was a film I was like really looking forward to watching because I've
Mhm.
been a big fan of his work, and when I saw that he's making a new movie, I'm like, oh, it's so exciting. But when I watched it, I found it very mid, like in the sense where, yeah, it's funny, I did not know it was a graphic novel, but I found it very
Hmm.
mid compared to his previous work, which is, I think, phenomenal. I love all of his previous work. But in
Hmm.
comparison,
Mhm.
the thick of it compared to In the Loop and stuff like that, I think like it was like, yeah, you get all the money and you get the stars, but I think the comedy I felt takes a hit.
Yeah, no, ironically for me, the first time I watched it, I
Yeah.
struggled to laugh at the jokes, not because they were badly written. In hindsight, now I find the movie a lot funnier. But if you
Mm-hmm.
read about what happened around Stalin's, not just his death, right? His Politburo, his inner circle, the way he treated them, and events that followed immediately after his death, there is very little embellishment in the movie. It's just that the
Yeah.
point of view the movie has taken is a humorous one. The events that they've shown, for the most part, actually played out in that manner. And it's okay to see things play out in this manner as a comedy, right? But if you take the humor out of it, you're like, this is a fucked up state of affairs, right? Like one man had built such a cult of personality and had so much sway over everyone that even after his death, it's like they're almost afraid of insulting his memory, insulting his ghost. It's sad, right? Like you see how they're tiptoeing around taking actions, and
Hmm.
the whole state of state of fear that he had built. Everyone was like, hey, we shouldn't say the wrong thing, and everyone's
Yeah.
backstabbing each other. And these things actually happened. I was listening to this podcast on Stalin where what he used to do was he used to call his inner circle, which is what is shown in the movie, right? And he used to get everyone hammered, right? And
Yeah.
he probably had an iron stomach, so he could like handle his alcohol. But he would make sure people were sloshed, and then he would ask them questions which could put them in a compromising position, right? He purposely wanted to like make people uncomfortable, and if you slipped up, you were sent off, and so you can't even like
Gulag.
unwind, right? Yeah, gulag. So you don't have the option of not drinking, but you have to, even if you're sloshed, it's such a horrible situation to be in, right? And this was a scenario like
Wow.
twice, thrice a week. So a lot of what's shown in the movie is kind of real. So the first time I watched it, I was like, haha, sad. I mean, funny but sad. Over time, I'm like, yeah, I know all that happened. Let's just enjoy it for the humor, and I can appreciate it a little more. I don't disagree with what Farah's saying. Like, I find if I were to compare a TV series and uh, a movie, right? Like, let's take Veep as an example. I find Veep to be a superior, work of art or whatever compared to Death of Stalin. But the movie has its moments, and speaking of which, I think far and away the best actor and character in the film is Zukov. Like Jason Isaacs Zukov is far and
Yeah.
away the funniest thing about the movie. The moment he enters the film, you're like, okay, it just goes up a notch.
Also, I think the film is very interesting. It starts with a nice, I think they're playing the opera or something, where they're broadcasting on radio, and right after they finish this
Hmm.
elaborate performance, they're like, we need to record it for Stalin. I think that kind of like sets the tone of like when they're trying to get
Yeah.
people back together and shows how farcical it is, and I think sets the tone of what you're going to expect from the rest of the movie, sort of a thing.
There's a
Yeah.
line
Yeah.
in the movie, I think, which that comes from Beria, and I forget, maybe I misquoted. He talks about like they have somebody locked up, and they're trying to get his wife, and his wife is trying to beg for his freedom, and he mentions a thing saying, "Oh, you can just like sleep with a nobody fucks better than a wife desperate to save her husband's life," and which is, and I might have paraphrased it, but I remember watching them going, "Oh." And then having, like Rohit said, having gone and read up the atrocities, it was very commonplace for.
No, they watered it down
Sorry.
in the movie. So in reality,
No.
Beria used to have a black limousine that would drive around Moscow at night, and he would, if he found some woman good looking, he would just tell his bodyguard, just pick her up, and they would be in another car. They would just get her to his Dhaka, and obviously there was no consent. What is consent to
Yeah.
these guys, right? And it was literally like just like abducting women off the street, and this was like a weekly, almost daily affair for Beria. So they watered it down in the film.
Mhm.
So it's like the old idiom, adage, right? Like tragedy plus time equals comedy. Given
Yeah,
time,
yeah,
we can make it, we can
exactly.
see it, the humor of it, but at the time it was happening, probably definitely horrific.
Perfect example of that. Yeah.
Uh,
But yeah,
did
for those of you,
Iannucci come from the? Sorry.
I was just going to say,
Before
I'm just recommending the film. Those of you who haven't,
oh,
please watch it.
definitely.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
So
Go
Iannucci
on.
comes from
Sorry.
this whole scene where I think he was a godfather to people like Steve Coogan, Charlie Brooker. All of them sort of came
Yeah.
from under his wing. I think the first time I became aware of Iannucci is that there's a show called The Day to Day, which is by Chris Morris. Chris Morris is the director of movies like Four Lions, and he made another
No,
film recently, but I forget. But so they had a show called The Day Today, and Iannucci was the co-creator of the show. They did new satire, from which the character Alan Partridge was born, which Steve Coogan played very famously in multiple series and
mm,
movies. I'm Alan Partridge, which is one of my favorite shows of all time. So then you have like even Charlie Brooker and stuff working under him to then later going on to create Black Mirror and stuff. So Iannucci in a way is an institution to himself,
yeah,
to the talent he's worked with, the talent he's nurtured, the talent he's actually like the kind of comedy itself that he's given rise, that dry comedy.
interesting.
But okay, I think we have waxed lyrical about Armando Iannucci for quite some time. If you don't know, we're all fans. Some of his entire filmography, some his earlier work. Anyway, but that was mine. Let's move on. Fala, let's take yours next.
Is a film that is, I think, very important to me now because I think it's the one that made me want to write comic books. I think I was in a very bad time in my life in the sense where like I just moved back to Bangalore having quit my job at the Viral Fever TVF, this YouTube channel that most people might know of. And like filmmaking wasn't really working out because like I had all of these grand ideas but never the budgets to execute them. And I was home, having quit my job, having moved back in with family, and I end up like putting on this film by stars Paul Giamatti called American Splendor. It had been lying on my hard disk for donkey's years, but this time I hit play and I was like, "Oh shit!" It was so fucking funny. It's about Harvey Pekar. Harvey Pekar was an influential figure in the underground comic scene in the 1970s and stuff, and he was a contemporary of Robert Crumb. So the story goes that Harvey Pekar was just a hospital clerk. He was a file pusher in a hospital in I think Cleveland, Ohio, or something like that. And he used to like listen to people tell stories, like listen to everyday conversation, and write like little stories based on that. And one time, Robert Crumb was traveling through town and was staying with a friend or something, and he presented his like stick figure drawings to Crumb, and Crumb went, "Hey, this is brilliant. I'll draw one for you," type of a thing, and that kind of like birthed this alternative comic scene in the US where like Crumb and him and a few others were contemporaries who were like doing comics that were for adults, uh, dealing with sex and other like crude humor and stuff like that, which was kind of like considered very like underground at the time, like compared to the superhero comics that were famous at the time. And the movie does a great job of adapting his story because there's multiple layers of meta playing out because there's Paul Giamatti playing him, there's the actual person Harvey Pekar commenting on how the movie is being shot. And later on, Pekar went on to write a graphic novel called My Movie Year, which is based on his experience in Hollywood and how his
Nice.
comic book was being adapted into like a movie and stuff. So it's a super meta film, and it was one of those that made me go, man, if this guy can write comics, so can I. And Musalman went from being like a video sketch idea into a comic book idea thanks to like this film. I hold it very dear to me because it's kind of like it's one of those things that either showed me the way or nudged me in the direction that that I am currently going in, and I've been in on it for like 7 years now, writing comics. And it was this movie that kind of like pushed me in the direction of writing comics, and it was just a hilarious movie. And anybody who's quirky, who's like obsessive, compulsive about collecting old records, old books, or whatever, relates so much to this character. And also, what is very funny to me is that like Harvey Pekar also became famous because he was featured on the David Letterman show quite a lot. Like
Hmm.
Letterman would always call him on as a guest, and Pekar would be like this character who would play a character, or whether I don't know if he actually hated it, the experience, but he'd completely diss the whole Hollywood mechanism that's trying to make him popular. Like he would come on Letterman and just diss the act of the idea of celebrity and not wanting to be there despite being there. So American
I haven't
Splendor.
seen. I haven't checked it out. I need. This is something I need to see.
Yeah, neither have
Uh,
I. Sounds very
hmm.
interesting.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
and
It's one
And
of
this
those
is
I
what.
think it was
life-changing movies.
apparent here. I think Falah's
Hmm.
passion was apparent. He had this flow talking about it. It clearly was coming from some place for him. That's got me interested to watch the movie more than anything else.
Who directed American Splendor?
You'll have to look it up. I don't remember. I just know that it stars
Okay.
Paul Giamatti, and that was the reason I watched it because I think Paul Giamatti has this interesting filmography. I think I saw Sideways, which is
Hmm.
by Alexander Payne around the same time. So I always find Paul Giamatti like a very interesting character actor. He's like
Yeah,
one of those. If he's in the cast, you might want to like look it up, like Holdovers
yeah,
that came out this year, like or
absolutely.
whatever. If he's on the cast, you would want to check it out because he's always like known to pick these interesting films. And this film really puts him front and center and lets him like totally showcase his range in a beautiful manner. And might have probably been instrumental in him landing all of the later roles as well. I think it was one of those star-making
Hmm.
performances on Giamatti's part.
I think this was the time there
Nice,
were a
nice.
lot of like these author-driven adaptations. It wasn't adaptation also
Mm,
around this time.
around the same time, yeah, I guess.
Adaptation. Nicolas Cage and
Also, this was in a way early 2000s was like the golden age of, at least for our generation, golden age of indies,
Indies.
right? Little Miss
Mm.
Sunshine, American Splendor, Sideways.
Mm. So, like, there's this YouTube channel that I watch where this person plays a character called Martin Scorsese and pretends to be Scorsese and reviews films like Bedazzled and like all of these MIB and stuff like that. He says cinema ended in the year 2002 when Spider-Man swung into theaters. So,
That
so
definitely is
yeah,
a
like
culture. He's
that
not.
is,
I mean, he's not wrong. It's a cultural moment for sure. Like I very. If you actually think about it, and he's not wrong at all. Like the impact Spider-Man, the first Spider-Man had, because nobody with that movie was like in dev hell for years, right? And what we saw on screen for the first time was like it changed the way we view blockbusters. That entire 2001, 2003, the blockbusters changed forever.
I think I would at least like relate to the impact of the Iron Man movie. I think like
I
Iron
was
Man
just
had
gonna say it was when Iron Man
cultural
released
impact.
when things changed. Absolutely. Because we've had
Hmm.
Yeah,
we've had Batman movies before. We've had an entire 3 or 4 movies of Superman before. Spider-Man is not unique in that sense, but for better or worse, MCU built something which spanned for like almost or more than a decade, right? It's still going on. Not so well
Hmm.
of late. When Iron Man came in and you could see things were, because they built this interconnected universe, the expectation on you as a viewer was that you have to watch all of them to keep abreast of the larger plot line.
Hmm.
I dislike that, that it puts that pressure on you, but that made superhero movie watching, how do I put this? You're almost dependent on it, right? Because
Yeah.
they made it mainstream. Everyone's watching it. You don't want to get left out of the conversation, so you got to watch everything because everything's connected. It's all very annoying and stupid, but that changed. I feel that changed movie viewing behavior a lot more than Spider-Man trilogy. We've had superhero
I
trilogies
actually,
before.
I, I think I would again disagree with the thing. I think the post-credit scene of Batman Begins does that. When Batman Begins, where Gordon meets him and presents him with the Joker card, is when we got
Not post
all of
credits.
these
It's the
films that
last
all.
scene. Hmm.
The last scene of
Oh,
Batman Begins, I think
Hmm.
that does that in a way, in my opinion, because after that, every movie was trying to set up a franchise. Like whether it's Sherlock Holmes or this
fair,
or that,
fair.
we stopped getting a complete story in films and then you always had teasers for sequels coming in a big
Fair.
way
That's a
from
good
I
point.
think Batman Begins.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah.
I was
Mhm.
literally
Anyway,
watching it
we
yesterday.
digress.
It was yeah, but that's a whole other conversation. Anyway,
But I think we've
We
gone
Rohit,
away
digress.
from American Splendor completely. I guess I think the
Yeah.
whole
yeah,
like
we
superheroes
went
is
down
such
we
a
went
black
down
hole that we
yeah
just
we
like
went
end
down
up like talking about superheroes no matter what. I guess.
I hate that happens. I consciously try
No,
not
but
to
that's
talk about
also the thing,
superhero
right?
movies.
And I think what I'm great at is plugging myself again. And I think for me, Musalman again is like a deconstruction superhero. Even though people think because it takes a superhero genre and is in an attempt to deconstruct it, because right now in the storyline, there's a character called Chairman Mouse who is Mickey Mouse, who's the representative of Disney, who's the villain. And he's basically pitching to Musalman that I'll build you a franchise, but at the cost of so and so. So I think like even Musalman was born out of my hatred for the superhero films. Like after a point, I was so angry at them that I wanted to deconstruct it, and that's kind of where the intention of Musalman comes from. Even though maybe in the process of writing it, I might have fallen more in love with superhero films, but like it was an
Well,
angry reaction
yes,
to like Disney.
you have no commercial aspirations with this. Your take on Disney.
Well,
Chairman Mars. Some of the shit he said in that thing, I'm like, dude, hala, come on, man.
my earlier my whole rant about the Marvel films is the fact that they serve as such blatant American propaganda. Like I can
What have
go
been
off
the
on like a whole like spiel of how Guardians of the Galaxy is basically like a Zionist propaganda film, and then
I want to
how
know
Captain
more. I
Marvel
want to know more.
like because like see Nova Prime is like Caucasian people who are living on a land that does not belong to them. The Cree people are colored people whose uh, race has been subjugated and they want revenge. That's what like that like what is that
Ronan,
Yeah,
Ronan
Ronan,
Ronan,
yeah.
Ronan
Ronan.
spiel is about. This is very Palestine in
Ronan
my
and Yasser
opinion, and
Arafat,
then
then, basically.
yeah, and then like you have Guardians who are like America who comes and like saves the day. For me, like when I saw Guardians the first time around, I thought this was like complete Zionist propaganda. And from that point
Yeah,
on, the MCU broke
definitely
apart, and then you have like
Zionist.
stuff like Captain Marvel, where like it's basically American Air Force propaganda films. So that's what my problem with the MCU has always been that they're like, and I feel like even like the Infinity Wars and Endgame films were like a precursor to the pandemic. They were trying to get us used to the idea that half the world's population is going to disappear, and we'll all be
Yes,
like okay with it. Like everybody is like Team Thanos, he's right because uh
Yeah.
like and they kind of like sold the pandemic to us in a way. I feel that's my opinion.
I think larger game they're prepping us for global warming, right? They're like, hey, half the
Mm.
population dying, we've seen this before, so it's totally fine.
Mm.
Anyway, I feel like we have been sucked into this black hole of superhero films. I think we'll try and I will pull ourselves out of it for Murph's sake. Anyway, let's
I
move. I
think
think
my
Rohit, you have
second movie.
your
Yeah.
final. We're on the last one. Yes.
I just realized my final movie, the guys have not superhero abilities so much as super bullshit abilities, but with that caveat, the movie I'm talking about is 2008's Wanted. For those of you who don't
Mm.
know, I don't even know how to explain the plot of this film, right? So basically, there is a secret group of assassins who control events at a global scale, but they work out of a defunct textile mill. Like, I don't
Mm.
make that make sense, right? And the whole premise of this movie is that these bunch of assassins have this ability that when they get an adrenaline rush, they can show the finger to the laws of physics, right? Like fuck Newton, I have adrenaline surging through me. They can bend bullets, and they that's what they show in the movie, right? He flips his gun
Mm.
in some way while shooting, and the bullets bend. Like what what
Bro,
even?
this movie is damn cool, dude. I will not handle any slander for how stupid and how awesome this movie is. Like it's such an
Yeah, I
outrageous
think
concept.
Chris Pratt is the co-worker that gets beaten by the keyboard in this very cool sequence in the film.
Fuck
I think
you
this is
with
like
the you.
fuck you. It says fuck you. This is pre Parks and Rec Chris Pratt also. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Oh, dude,
there's so much. I mean, I haven't even scratched the surface of all the bullshit in the movie. So you have these physics-defying bullet-bending
For
assassins.
Angelina Jolie, who's like super hot in this
oh, she's
Who's
hot
film.
as fuck in this movie.
Angelina
super
Jolie
hot
is
in
like,
this film.
Mhm.
Yeah, super hot. But putting that aside, the way the targets in this movie are selected, there's something called the loom of fate, which is a fucking hand loom that prints out the name of. I'm like, what is going on, guys? Where is governance in this organization? What is your SOP? What is happening? This is
Oh, it has
like
it
wall
has
to wall
one of the
bullshit.
most insane climactic fight sequences involving Angelina Jolie, which I remember watching in like for the first time I watched it and I went, that's bullshit, but that was so fucking good.
The one where
I
the
mean,
bullet goes all
would
around.
you?
Yeah. Just like the fuck is happening?
The bullet has endless momentum, dude. It's killed 10 people, it's still going.
No,
Circle,
somebody
yeah.
step back. No, the moment it's hit somebody else, the others just need to step back. And the plot of this movie is over.
You've seen those
No,
memes, no?
but
It shows directed by Robert Wade. Like, somebody just step back. It's the end of the movie.
I
No,
think
no.
it's a fair companion piece with Salman Khan's Wanted. You know, it's like
I
one
was
of
just
those things.
about to bring it up. I was
It
like,
can be like a
wanted
double
walk so
feature.
wanted could run.
It can be a double feature. You have Wanted and Wanted double screening where you can show this one first and then Bhai second or whatever. Because like it was the two Wanteds. I think the second Wanted is like Bhai's Wanted is when Bollywood broke. You know, when they went overboard
Yeah,
with the South Indian adaptations and they gave Prabhu Deva the reins of like what
yes,
should
I
be like a
completely
movie,
agree.
and then
It'll be called Yahan bhi hoga, wahan bhi hoga screening. When you have one side wanted playing and the other side wanted.
Imagine you do a double feature of Wanted and Wanted. There's like Netflix
Yeah.
people knocking at your door. Sir, हमें खबर मिली यहाँ पे बकचोदी चल रही है. आप क्या कर रहे हो? Oh my
Oh,
god.
dude.
I think
It's
I think I actually haven't seen either Wanted fully. In my, I don't.
I've definitely not
I've
seen the
seen
Salman one.
like I think I've seen
Uh,
scenes from this. I definitely seen this Wanted on TV when it's been running, but I don't think I've sat down and watched it in its entirety ever. And
guys,
I
I
think
watched
this
this
both
one
things
for
go together.
because to my eternal
Oh,
shame, I went to a theater and watched the James McAvoy film.
oh.
No, not the
Don't worry.
Salman one.
I watched the Salman movie in theater. I will one up you on this.
No, on principle, I
But
won't
dude,
watch Salman films. That's a whole other
but
thing.
dude,
But
now this whole wanted and wanted double feature needs to happen. We should make this happen, fella. Let's screen it. It's like, guys, how do you want to watch wanted and wanted at the same time? It's a great idea. That brings us to the end of this episode. I don't think it could have ended in a more derailed manner. like, like comparing wanted and wanted together. There is purely like a true testament of the guests for on this episode. The conversation has fucking yo-yoed to places I never thought were possible, but that's how I love it. Our viewers, I don't know if we love it as much, but it's okay. We do this for us and you do it for them. Before we go, Fala, I want to thank you for coming on, and I want you to let the people know what you've been up to and where they can find you. So the floor is yours. Please take it away.
All right, so after many years of delay, I finally managed to put together a website. You can read all of my comics on this website called musalmancomics.com. musalmancomics.com. And X because again it's underground comics, a homage to the kind of comics that Harvey Picard and Crumb made. They used to call it COMIX. So it's musalmancomic.com. And I think a couple of days ago, I put out a new video on my YouTube channel of Falah Faisal Joint, which is called Found in Majestic, in which I take a walking tour of Majestic with this author called Zach Oya, who's written this detective fiction series that's set in Bangalore. This Swedish author but lives in Bangalore, and he's written the series called the Mr. Majestic. So I did a walkthrough Majestic with him where he showed me places that inspired his novel or feature in his novel. So Falah Faisal joined on YouTube, Musalman Comics for the comics, and Godzogram on Instagram if you want to find me and personally discuss any of these films that we mentioned.
And more. Fala watches more like key shit. Don't just because he's like talking about Harvey Picard and Robert Crumb. No, he watches like random Bollywood crap. Don't let that face fool you. uh, But yeah, I think that's it. We'll be back again
Also,
in a
I think
week or
I
two.
feel like there can be like an extra segment. I feel like I've fallen in love with the MCU in the Phase 5. Like the more experimental, weird shit. I think I have a soft spot for Thor: Love and Thunder.
Fala, I understand people having that soft spot for Multiverse of Madness. Thor: Love and Thunder was like these guys were
No, no, no.
engaging in whatever they're engaging in, and then they
No, no,
made a
no.
movie as like a byproduct of it.
No, so I have a special category of movies I put in the category called bong hit movies. It's movies that inspire me to take a bong hit midway so that I appreciate the rest of the movie better. So Thor:
Okay.
Love and Thunder definitely falls under my bong hit movie category because it's just like stupid fun, like
Out
you're
of
baked in,
necessity.
like and
Out of
enjoy the
necessity,
visual
right?
ride. So I think like the latter half of the MCU, like post Endgame and post in is where I think in Endgame they had a plan and everything was working according to plan, whereas now they have no clue what they're doing. They're having to ditch like storylines and like bring back people, and they're going full Ekta Kapoor right now. So I feel like I weirdly like this version
And
of
if
the
their
MCU
writers
a little
aren't
bit more
fucking
than
up,
I.
the actors that they're building the next phase around them are having domestic violence charges. It was like, yeah, I can't control all these contingencies. What's happening?
The MCU has gone full Manchester United at this point.
Oh wow,
But
that is wow. Oh dear God, I'm not talking about. I have to record a football podcast after this. It's a whole other this conversation, but lovely. Uh,
okay,
yeah,
cool.
no.
I think that was
Speaking of
my side take.
bong hit films, I've like taken like Fala has famously we have gone to watch. I think Birdman, the two Inarritu films, Birdman and Revenant. I think Birdman he had like an amazing experience. Revenant because it's like I think the movie shaking you for 3 hours. Fala
I
was
was
like,
going to
dude,
ask
what the hell?
that cannot have been pleasant.
Oh, Revenant, I don't think was pleasant. I
Yeah,
remember him having a bad time.
Revenant is just like a whole bunch of people suffering in cold and horrible circumstances, like for Leo's Oscar. So
Yeah. Give us Oscar for most acting.
It's like
most
anyway, that's a
acting.
whole other conversation. Yeah, it's like imagine Mark Hamill being like, dude, he got into like a horse. I did this 60 years ago. I mean, 40 years ago. What the fuck? But yeah,
But anyway,
uh,
we
that's us,
digress.
my friend. We're just digressing. This is like the digress episode. But that brings us to the end of this episode. I will leave links to Falah's Instagram, his website, the Musselman links, everything in the comments. Please feel free to go check him out. He's much more famous than us. So we will see you on the next episode.
Infamous.
Until then, shut the fuck up, Falah. My we'll see you on the next one. Take care.
Bye.
Jai Shri Allah.